Hey everyone, and welcome to another episode of Cyber Caffeine Chats, where we're taking a complex topic and breaking it down into smaller, easier to understand chunks. Well, in this series, we're talking about all things AI in the context of cybersecurity. We've been exploring various different ways in which we can keep your users and your data safe, whether it's from being able to prevent attacks, looking at detection and response capabilities to incoming threats, but also taking a proactive approach to reduce your risk and increase your visibility. Well, before we get into the serious topic today, let's have a look at this month's example of a weird and wonderful way that we can use AI today. Okay, so what are we talking about today? Well, previously we covered a bunch of different topics, firstly around prevention across various different attack surfaces that might be relevant for AI. That's kind of like your front door, a way to stop attacks as they're happening. And then towards the end of last year, we started to touch on detection, particularly around deepfakes, which are becoming a bigger and bigger problem these days as well. Well, today, what I want to do is take a step back, zoom out a little bit, and start to consider all the different factors that we might want to think about when it comes to AI security, whether that's for prevention, detection, or also risk management and visibility as well. Now, if you think about when we moved to cloud many years ago, a lot of people thought, hey, I'm just throwing servers and workloads up there and I don't need to worry about physical machines, things that I'm racking and stacking in the data center anymore. And whilst that was kind of true, we had a shared responsibility matrix in place. So cloud providers were still responsible for those sorts of things. And it's still the same with AI. Whilst we might be putting a lot of the focus now on, the services, the applications, the models that's really doing the cool stuff and creating the business value, there's a lot of underlying components, infrastructure and pieces that need to work together to enable those applications. And we've got a responsibility as defenders to make sure that we cover all of our bases when looking at the security here. It only takes one weak point in the armor for attackers to compromise and start to gain a foothold and start to do some damage. Now, depending on the organization, depending on the use case, we may not have all these components working at once. There may be a mix of them, it may be a different interdependency. But what I want to try and give you is a bit of a blueprint for AI security, so that as you're building applications, as you're looking at your usage within your company, you've got a lot of different areas to consider and make sure that we don't miss any gaps here. So with that, let's have a look and take a look at an example of what this blueprint looks like. Okay, so let's have a think about what an AI blueprint might look like. And we can start to break this into different areas and stages as we're creating these applications. First of all, if we think about our developers as they're creating things, they're going to be building code and lots of it. So we can ask ourselves questions like, are there secrets in here, are there vulnerabilities or malware at that shift left perspective, right, when things are getting developed off the bat. From there, we can start to consider the deployment stage. So do we have any CI/CD pipelines in place? And are we actually automating the security check-in of things that are going through that into production? For example, container images that we might be pushing out there. From there, it starts to get interesting as we start to consider runtime security. As things are up and running, as we're starting to get operational, again, there's several different areas to consider here. So first of all, from an infrastructure perspective, if you're running on modern infrastructure, you've probably got some cloud environments, whether that's AWS, whether it's Azure, GCP. Again, are those configured to best practice, to compliance standards, or are we introducing risk there? We're going to have a ton of different workloads in place, more than likely, whether that's traditional things like servers, EC2 instances, or if you're running more modern microservices-based environments like containers and serverless. And all that sort of stuff is going to have some storage either attached or running separately in things like S3 buckets. Again, has that got malware in? How we configured it? Have we opened up our risk posture as part of that? Now, next we move into the application layer. So first of all, this is where we need to think of things like traditional application building, but also APIs that we might have exposed through to the internet. Are they open? Are they unauthenticated? Are they secure? This is also where we'll start thinking about the models themselves as we're looking at LLMs. So are people trying to jailbreak them? Are people trying to run prompt attacks? Things like that. There's a lot of things to consider here. And then also probably one of the most important pieces on this blueprint is the data itself. So whether that's stuff that's at rest in storage, moving through the network in transit or in use in the applications themselves, are we leaking any sensitive information, PII, things like that? Are we violating any policies? And then finally, we can look at the access layer from a few different angles here. So first of all, identity, as the perimeter is traditionally dissolving now as we move to the cloud to SaaS, identity is becoming the new perimeter. So have we really reduced least privilege models? Have we enabled MFA where we need to, and ensure we've not got overprivileged access in place? Zero trust is another thing to take into account here. So our various internal, external users accessing applications, whether that be private AI apps that we built or also public things like ChatGPT, Copilot, and Claude. Are we doing that in a secure manner where we're not implicitly just trusting the users of the devices or the applications themselves? And across all of these different layers across this blueprint, we need to think about, first of all, have we got visibility? So do we understand what we've got in place, how many of it there is, and what's actually happening? Once we've done that, we can understand our risk. We can figure out if we've got a great risk over the company, which one of these particular areas is contributing mostly towards that risk. We can start to detect attacks. So we put sensors in all these different areas. If attackers are trying to breach in, what's happening and how is all that correlating together as an overall cyber attack? And finally, if we have attacks, how are we going to respond to them and actually protect and prevent those attacks taking place? So I know this seems like a lot of different information, but again, if we've got the right tools in place, the right process, the right platform to monitor all these different things, this starts to become easy and we can start to happily deploy and configure our AI applications with ease moving forward into the future. All right, well, I hope you enjoyed that session and found some useful information in there. If you want to see more insights around AI security, stay tuned for the next episode of Cyber Caffeine Chats. See you there.